Hi, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. And I'm very excited to interview attorney Nicole Reeves-Lavallee. She has a family law firm out of Worcester. She's absolutely amazing at what she does. And today she's going to answer a question that I'm sure everybody wants to know the answer to, and that is how to save money on a family court case. Hello, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I can't wait for everyone to get educated.
Well, this is a really good topic because you hear about some court cases just drag on and on and on, and they end up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars over fighting over little tiny things. I mean, have you seen these horror stories happen?
I've seen it. I've advised my clients when I can see it's coming. There are certain cases that it's maybe you have opposing counsel that just wants to nickel and dime everything and ask stupid questions and send you messages every single day that really could have been in one concise letter rather than 5 different messages that you have to reply to. There's all these little tactics that other attorneys use to kind of run up bills. And then you have other times where it's not the attorneys doing it, it's the other party. And whether it be mom or dad or whoever, but they just do not like their spouse or their ex, and all they want to do is fight. They would rather spend money on their attorney than give it to their ex, or to more importantly, give it to the family unit and give it to their children indirectly.
That is so sad. People's school educational funds are totally drained in some cases because of people fighting over little things. And so I just wondered, I have heard that a good family attorney can tell like how much fighting over a certain thing will cost. So if someone's going to fight over custody, it's going to cost X. Someone's going to fight over a business, it's going to cost Y. I mean, have you had that experience where you can kind of foresee what the price tag is on certain arguments that are going to happen?
Certainly. I think, the question is really, what are we fighting over? So are we fighting over parenting time, or are we fighting over custody? Because those are two huge things. If we're fighting over custody, chances are, unless somebody's willing to give, or unless we have a third party that's doing some kind of an evaluation like a GAL or our counsel or something of that nature, then you're going to be stuck in your position. You're going to go to trial. There's no doubt about it. And a custody trial is going to cost you $20,000+. It's just going to be that way. So you need to decide whether that's money you want to invest. If it's a parenting schedule, again, it kind of looks at how much we're fighting over. Are we fighting over one day? Because that's usually what it boils down to. And in reality, that one day is usually 3 or 4 hours. So again, you have to weigh those odds. I get it. Your kid is 5 years old, and this might be the plan for the next 13 years. That's huge. So those 5 hours matter to you. But how much money do you want to spend that you're going to be putting in the attorney's pocket rather than coming up with some kind of compromise? Maybe you take 2.5 hours, something of that nature. So that one's a little bit touchier in terms of pricing. That usually doesn't go to trial. That's usually something that the judge will kind of yell at both of you and say, hey, knock it off. This is what I think you can do. And a lot of times they'll come up with solutions that maybe the attorneys haven't even thought of. But we can get very creative with working out that parenting schedule so that it works for both parents. So that one's, usually under $5,000 total, again, depending on where you're looking at. And then you have division of assets. So whether it be a business or just, we have multiple houses or retirement accounts of those nature. Those obviously, again, depending on how much people want to evaluate the businesses or evaluate the assets, do you want to fight over the house? One appraiser comes back and says it's $300,000. The other one comes back and says it's $350,000. Are you going to split the difference? Because at the end of the day, if you go to trial, you might be spending that money. And the judge is probably going to run it down the middle. But maybe the judge does buy one of your experts, but experts are going to cost you money. So these are all things that you need to be aware of. Every time you want to have somebody that goes up there on the stand that is a professional, we have to pay them. We have to pay them for our time. We have to pay them for their knowledge and their expertise. So those are things that get expensive. An valuation of a business, same type of thing where it's, a pension is the number. We know what that number is. We don't have to nickel and dime it. So the things that we do nickel and dime are the things that can fluctuate, such as a house, such as, maybe a tax dependency issue or a business. Those are the things where generally you can come up and, again, spend a lot of money going to trial. But again, you have to figure out what the cost analysis is in your mind and how much money you want to devote to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, those are hard decisions to make, and unfortunately, sometimes there's not enough money to fight for the things that you want, depending on if you're the moneyed spouse or the one that took a back seat while somebody else built their career. So, I mean, you just don't know. One of the first issues that will help is, just figuring out how to communicate with your ex. There is a question I have, though. I mean, everybody knows somebody who's divorced, and everyone knows somebody who has had, an easy divorce or sometimes terrible divorces. And I think that one of the saddest things is if one of the parents belittles the other parent in front of the children or to the children during their parenting time. Now, if you have an ex that is belittling you in front of your child and always saying those negative things, is that something that you should tell your attorney?
I think you should tell your attorney all of that stuff. The question is, how is the most effective way to do that? And it really kind of depends on your attorney, but generally speaking, my suggestion is you keep a log. Does the attorney need to know about every single time? Probably not. Now, again, there's extreme circumstances where somebody is saying something very defamatory and it needs immediate attention, whether it be a restraining order or rises to a level of, hey, we need to change custody because it is so defamatory, and I won't use that language here, but I'm sure you can use your imagination. And so what happens is, depending on that, maybe we do need to go into court. But if it's just, hey, somebody made a snide comment and, you're a fat witch, which isn't what they said, but something to that nature, guess what? You jot that down. You write it down. You tell the attorney. It's not something that we're going to keep a log of, but does it need to be said to the attorney immediately? No. It's not going to rise to a level that the court's going to do anything extreme. So we need to keep a log of all of that. And at the end of the day, the more times that we can show this type of behavior, then that's something we can take to the judge. And then maybe we can make a tweak to that parenting schedule or put ramifications in place for such comments.
Well, that is a really great suggestion. And there's another issue that arises from that, is that sometimes you can't talk to your ex without getting in a fight. Sometimes your ex just won't talk to you at all. And you might have something important to discuss, either about the case or about the children. And so you end up going through attorneys, and that's a nice thing, not to have to deal with your ex if you do have that kind of a terrible relationship. But unfortunately, it costs you every time you do that. Is there a way to mitigate that cost?
There is. One of the things that we've started implementing, and the court has actually started ordering, is what is called our Family Wizard. It's an application that you can download. It goes on your computer or on your phone. Biggest thing with this is that what they will do is you're typing something in to your ex, and everybody involved, so your attorneys, the judge, and everyone else that's assigned to this case, is going to be able to have this information, see what it says, and know what transpired between the two of you. The best thing about this app is what it does is it allows you to write a message, and then it will say, hey, maybe your tone is a little bit bad. How about we rephrase that? So it's actually giving you tidbits to go knock it off. which is a really good thing because we all know what pushes our ex's buttons. It's a really good tactic, but this will allow you to back up and say, hey, I need to rephrase that in such a way so it's not going to have animosity. And more importantly, when the judge and my attorney sees this, they're going to know that I'm the reasonable one, not the other person. So it definitely has benefits. There is a cost to it, but it's a nominal cost. And like I said, a lot of the times the courts are now ordering people to do that so that they don't have to have any interaction with each other in person, and they can have a log that's not going to be edited, deleted, or otherwise compromised.
Well, I think that's fantastic. And it might even work for current relationships. I can just see a couple sitting across from each other at the table typing things in and getting those alerts. You know what? Maybe you should rephrase that. You're not going to get a good result from putting it that way. So that's really great. That's a fantastic thing to have. And it sounds like it saves people a lot of money.
It definitely can save money in terms of attorney's fees and going into court, because the he said, she said, and the texting of the world, guess what? We all know we can delete those things. So this prohibits all of that, and you get the big picture as both the judge and the attorney, knowing exactly who's in the right and who's not.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, another aspect of a divorce is the finances and making sure that all of the assets and liabilities are split properly. And unfortunately, sometimes it's difficult to get that financial information that your spouse has, and you want to get it so that you can make sure that everyone has a fair deal. Is there an inexpensive way to get that snapshot?
I don't think there's an inexpensive way, but I think there's reasonable ways. Everything's going to cost you a little bit of money. You have to expect that when you're going through any of this litigation. But if you know your spouse has horrible records, or they're just not going to produce it because that's their mentality, and they're sticking their head in the sand and going, I'm not divorcing you, so I'm not going to give you any of the records. Well, that's not going to be helpful to you. So, unfortunately, maybe what we do is we send out subpoenas. Now, subpoena is going to cost you a little bit of money for both my time as well as for the constable to serve it. But at the end of the day, we're not going to play the game where I go, please give me the records, please give me the records, please give me the records. No, I'm going to have a constable or sheriff serve it on the agency itself. So the Bank of America bank accounts that we know exist, the retirement accounts, so I can serve any of those people directly. So I can serve these people directly, that I don't have to worry about whether or not the accurates or whether or not the records are accurate, whether or not the document is complete, or whether or not anything's been altered. Because the third party isn't going to alter anything. They just want to give you what they want and make you move away. So there is a cost associated with it, but it's a relatively inexpensive cost versus going directly to the spouse that you know is not going to comply.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's really great information because, I know that that's one of the stall tactics of, sometimes of your spouse that you're trying to get divorced from is to withhold information. And information is so important when you're trying to structure a proper deal. Now, I'm just curious. I know this may not be something most people ask, but I mean, can your spouse or his attorney get in trouble for withholding that information? I mean, aren't you supposed to share all financial information when you are going into the courts for a divorce?
So there are certain things that are mandatory discovery, which means both parties need to comply with it. There are other things that have to be requested. So I would have to send out requests for production of documents, requests for admissions, requests for interrogatories, those types of things. So I can request them, and obviously I'm not entitled to them until such time that I request it. And then assuming either they're mandatory or I have properly requested them, then there are procedures in place where I have to follow through and call them up and ask them and say, where's my records, follow it up with a letter. And then if they still don't comply after that, then I can file a motion to compel. motion to compel would be presented to the court, and the court would decide what records I'm entitled to, or all of the records, and most importantly, whether or not I'm entitled for their ex to pay my attorney's fees because of their failure to comply.
Wow, I mean, that sounds like that can get pretty contentious if you're dealing with that. So in this case, it sounds like a little bit of strategy is involved on the part of your attorney, and your attorney needs to know what additional documents to ask for other than just the ones that are given in every single case. I mean, it sounds to me, and I don't know if you've heard of this happening with having the wrong attorney, that just didn't ask for the right documents and then you lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. What would you say about that?
I don't know if there's a big concern about losing money. It's more about custody, parenting time. Those are the things where it usually comes into play, because a lot of attorneys know the standard questions and the standard documentation to get. Now, of course, we do rely on our clients, because we're not going to know that you have a cemetery plot unless you tell us. That's not the normal thing that comes up in conversation. We're not going to know if your spouse has a 401k if you've never told us. Those are the things that we always ask. That's the reason, one of the reasons why we ask for your tax return, so that we can look at all of those things to determine if maybe you don't have a clue. So some of that stuff we do rely on the clients to come up with. A lot of it we do rely on the documentation that is mandatory. So it's a little bit harder to hide assets, but usually what ends up happening in discovery phases is that people don't ask relevant questions when it comes to parenting time or custody. That's where we really have to rely on our clients. Clients have told me, and I write down every single thing. And the reason why I write it down is because it's really important. I'm going to go back to that list at some point and go, hey, Erica told me that her ex has a drinking problem. Okay, let me ask a specific question about his drinking. And then I'm going to ask you further questions and say, okay, well, where did he drink and how often did he drink, and did he go to certain bars or things of that nature, so that I can ask very poignant questions about what specifically he's doing, so that I can get him to admit or deny those things. And then maybe we can get supplemental documents from other sources that shows, yeah, he was at that bar that night. Yeah, we have it on his credit card, but he lied under the interrogatories and said he didn't. Those are the types of things that really a good attorney is going to be able to gather. So it is some financial, but it's more of what's going on in either the relationship of conduct of the marriage, or more importantly with the children.
Yeah, and I can see where a lot of these issues must arise, because there's a few big reasons people get divorced. Communication plays a big part in most of them, I think. And then of course there's money and children, and there's I don't know, there's a whole bunch of things, but it's good to know that you need to, if you can't communicate with your spouse, you definitely better communicate with your attorney.
Yes, please don't hide anything from us. Even if you think it's not relevant at the time, it is relevant. It's one of those things that if we decide, tell us, we'll write it down, even though we don't necessarily need it at the moment, we will use it at the appropriate time.
So if you're trying to save money on attorney's fees and your attorney says, hey, the only way you're going to stop paying me is to settle this, does that mean that that person has to go with whatever their ex wants, if they just want to have to stop paying these legal fees and settle?
I don't think they should ever do that. There are options. If there's a huge discrepancy in income, maybe it's something that we can go in and we can ask for your spouse to pay the attorney's fees. That's an option. It's in limited circumstances and we have to be able to prove certain things, but that is one option that we can ask for. So maybe, yeah, I am going to say, you have to fight for this, but I also may be able to ask for the court for the spouse to pay those attorney's fees. Another option is that, again, what are we fighting over? I've had times where people are fighting over the car. It is not worth it. It will never, ever be worth it. Do not waste your money on it. I don't care. Unless it's a classic car and is worth, 30 plus $1,000 in equity, maybe. Short of that, don't bother. Those are things that people like to fight over nickel and dime, and that's the stuff that I kind of shake my head as an attorney and go, you do realize that you're going to be spending, $5,000 to win 3,000. And, people will tell me it's principle. Principle is a very expensive word. Let me just tell you, it is not worth the principle. I do not care. My suggestion would be go home, complain to your girlfriends, have a night out, do whatever you need to, but get over principle, because 9 times out of 10, the judge doesn't find principle as a viable option. So I think you do need to compromise on certain things. And when you're fighting over principle, generally speaking, that's when I'm going to intervene and go, yeah, you're going to go to trial over this, and it's going to be really stupid. And you're not going to, ever make up for that cost-effective wise. So do you really want to spend $10,000, $15,000 to fight over this? And so, when you kind of put it into perspective, a lot of times people will budge. Hopefully, the other party's attorney is telling them the exact same thing, because you know what? I don't know any attorneys that are going to go to trial for less than $10,000. So it is something to be aware of. But you also have rights, and you also can take things to the judge. And a lot of times the judges will give you opinions and say, ma'am, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. They won't tell you that they're going to make an order that says that. They're going to tell you to go out in the hallway and talk about it. So it's something that you should be aware of, and you do have options. I don't think you should ever just settle, but I think you need to look at the big picture.
That's really great advice, because, these decisions, sometimes they do last for the rest of your life, and you can't go back and change it. I mean, even anything that you want to change starts from that moment, if it does in fact get changed. I mean, it can be, I think it can be a really big mistake. I personally know several people that don't get any child support at all for a couple of kids. And so they raise their kids on a very small salary, and that it's great to say, I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps, but also you have to think about the kids, and that you weren't the only person that made the child. So somebody else is also responsible. And so, really, doing what's best for your family, and forgetting pride, because at one point you can't go back and get the money back that you didn't get when you could have got it. I mean, am I right about that?
Absolutely. Could have said it any better.
Well, I feel like I took the long road on that one, but yeah. So this has been a lot of fantastic information. Are there any things that we may have missed in ways to save money on a court case?
I think the other thing is, knowing what your attorney's willing to do. It's very interesting that there are attorneys out there that practice in family law and refuse to go to trial. Know that before you hire an attorney. Is your attorney willing to go to trial? And if the answer is no, do you really want that attorney so they can get you all the way through pretrial? It doesn't settle, and now you've got to hire another attorney, and who's basically got to be familiarized with the last 8 months of your case. Yeah, you can transfer the documentation over, but does that make sense? So that's just something to be aware of. The other thing is, ask what type of services they have, ask what type of payment plans that they have available. What we do offer is we offer full representation, which is from beginning to end. We represent you. We also offer what is called LAR, limited assistance representation. So you can pay for certain services that you need me for. If you say, hey, I'm okay with doing documentation, then you can do that. If you say, hey, I really want you for court only, Those are things that we can do. So we can tweak it to your liking so you can keep your costs down. And realistically, when you have an attorney on the other side that is a paper pusher and all they want to do is send out documents and harass you on a daily basis, I know that 99% of my clients are very accepting and can read a document, understand it, and know whether or not they need to reach out to me. Guess what? The people that do need to reach out to me and say, hey, Nicole, should I be worried about this? I can answer it really fast, keep their costs down. A lot of times it's just, hey, don't do this. Well, guess what? If you know you're doing something wrong and the attorney called you out on it, then don't do it. Why do you need to call me? So again, you kind of be your own judge as to what services you need me for and when you need me for it. So that's another way to keep your costs down.
That's really great advice. And that's such a great point too, because I really feel like the attorneys that go to trial have a completely different mindset than the ones that don't. And it's not saying that all they want to do is go to trial. It's not saying that at all. But the fact that if it comes to that, they will go to trial, that you want someone that's prepared to have that option. And if you don't have a fighter, you don't have a really great opportunity to make things fair in your divorce.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing with that is, a lot of those attorneys are more inclined to encourage you to settle cases. Let's just really do this. Let's do this. We're here pre-trial and we're doing the pre-trial. I really think you should do that. Where an attorney that isn't afraid to go to trial is going to be more inclined to say, hey, this is what I think you should do. This is what the cost is going to be. This is what it's going to look like. Here's your choice. What would you like to do? I think that gives you a different perspective, because I think when attorneys kind of reach their edge of when they're done representing you, you're going to get a different outlook as to how they're going to treat you and what recommendations they're going to make.
It's a really great discussion today, Nicole. Thank you so much for all of the information. I feel like you're really helping people with this. I do want to make the audience know that attorney Nicole Reeves-Lavallee is in Worcester. She's open for business. If you have any questions at all, and even if you don't think you're going to make a move for a while and you're not sure, it's very, very helpful to go in and talk to Nicole, because she can at least look at your case, because everybody's case is unique and different. You can't say, oh, I know what's going to happen because I saw something on TV or I heard what happened with my sister. It's really not the same. And you need to find out what your options are. And, and Nicole can do that. She's very good at formulating a fantastic strategy for you. So I would encourage you to pick up the phone and give Reeves-Lavallee a call, because they're very, very helpful. And I've heard firsthand from many of her clients how fantastic and happy they are with her and her staff.
Look forward to helping everyone.
Yes. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And thank you again, Nicole, for coming on today. It's always a pleasure, and we'll look forward to speaking with you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.